In cybersecurity, we're always on, working long hours, fighting threats, and staying ahead of the curve. But behind those scenes, burnout is real, stress is high, and mental health often takes a backseat. In today's episode, we're going to go beyond the code to talk about something just as critical: mental health and mindfulness in cybersecurity. From managing stress to staying centered, it's time we prioritize our well being just as much as our security protocols. Let's dive in. All right, welcome to this episode of the Cybersec Migrant. And like I said in the introduction, we're going to be talking about something that's very important. It's even aptly relevant in this time that we're actually celebrating Cybersecurity Awareness Month. It's something that we know that in the industry, cybersecurity, it can be quite stressful. It can be quite challenging. There's so many things we have to deal with. And it's sometimes difficult for us to actually open up and say, oh, I am overwhelmed, I'm stressed, there's a lot going on for me, which is why today's episode, like I said at the beginning, we're going to be talking about mental health in cybersecurity. And for today, I've actually sought out somebody who is an expert in cybersecurity, but she's also a great advocate for mental health in the industry. And today's guest with us is Arti Gadia. Arti, welcome to the Cybersec Migrant podcast.
Thank you. And Jambo, namaste, greetings, bonjour, konnichiwa to
Yes,
everybody, as well as
all of them.
happy Cyber Awareness Month. Excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. So, first, let's start from this. Let's have Artie, tell us a bit about yourself, your background. How did you get into cybersecurity? And then how did your interest in mental health? Because it's like cybersecurity expert and mental health advocate. It seems very far removed from each other. But how did you bring those two together?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, my network knows me as a change maker, and I have a clear purpose, which is to be a voice for underrepresented groups in STEM and in leadership. I joined this industry back in 2004 when I was a new immigrant in Canada. I moved from the UK, but born and raised in Kenya, Africa, where I went to the UK to have a degree, and then I worked. And then in 2004, I moved here. And when I was here as a new immigrant, I struggled to get a job. It was stressful because I didn't know anybody. And it was very hard until I started learning I've got a network, I've got to figure out who can help me here. And that was my first step into getting into cybersecurity because I remember there was a recruiter, she introduced me. Well, she was from the UK, and we immediately connected. And she said, "There's this opportunity already. It's in cybersecurity." And I'm like, just get me the job because I've got bills to pay. I'm stressed. Right. But at that time, stress was different level of stress than what stress is. Right. So at that time, it was like, how am I going to pay the bills? My husband and I were new into the country. We were, didn't have much savings because we used all our savings in moving. So the level of stress was very different. It's more about finding that job because the bills don't go away. Rent does not go away,
Nope.
unfortunately. And there was this opportunity, and she said you'd have to take a step back into your career, and but it's an industry, it's a fun industry, and I was like, I know about antivirus because not my laptop, my university, when I was doing a degree at university, I had a project that that machine in the library was infected with a virus, and I lost my whole project. And
Ooh.
the virus saved the day for me because, but that's what it was. What I knew about cybersecurity. It was more just about antivirus. And so there was this position. She said it's a sales position as entry level. Are you willing to take a step back into your career? Of course, as a new immigrant, um, at that moment, it's like I looked at it as two things. One is it helps me. I need a job because I need to make money and pay the bills. But two is this is actually a really good industry to actually go in because I don't know too much about it, but there's so much I'm going to learn about it. And
Mhm.
I had big career goals and aspirations once I joined this industry that this would be an exciting place to join. And so that's how I joined this industry. And the second part of your question is how did I get into um, combining mental health. And we'll go along as we talk a little bit, but it was just through my journey. I've gone through ups and downs. We all know there's not enough women in our industry, and oftentimes
Yeah,
we're
true,
having to
true.
prove ourselves. Oftentimes we are not given the recognition, and sometimes we are given the recognition, right? But it's not a frequent thing. And so as you go through your own journey, I personally had faced my own personal stresses, but I'd also stressed what we call, I'll talk a little bit more later on about, is third degree stress. As
Mm,
when you're looking after a family member, but you don't realize mentally how much stress or work, how much stress that can get onto you while you're performing your day-to-day activities. A lot of people don't realize that. So that's how I got into it. It's just through my own journey, and I wanted to make sure that viewers and listeners here can actually recognize some of the signs, because you want to recognize this sooner versus later on, because it's harder to fix later on. And we've just got to normalize these conversations a lot more today.
yeah, that's so true. Thank you for that introduction. And I like the way you ended it. We have to normalize this conversation, because that's the only way we can actually move forward. There's so much of stress for particularly in our industry, because it's always
Mhm.
evolving every day. Like you said, sometimes there's the third party stress where you've got stress outside of work, you bring that to work with you. Your work is stressful already. So there's so much that can actually make things worse. And if you don't address it early enough, it becomes a challenge. And as somebody who has sort of journeyed this, 20 years as an immigrant in Canada, congratulations. My journey
Thank
is
you.
just starting. I'm only 6+ years, so I have a long way to go. But as somebody who is in our industry, who understands the kind of stresses we face, what would you say are some of the unique stress factors that we as cybersecurity professionals face relative to other industries that they may not that their industries aren't stressful, but just because of the unique nature of the work we do, makes it actually stressful for us in cybersecurity.
Yes. And I think, like if I really answer that question, is industry to industry can vary, but across the board, stress is there that people don't realize. And we spend 8 hours, sometimes more hours, just because we're stressed, because we need to get projects done, we need to get these completed. And a lot of stress is built upon, of course, work related, outside of
Mm,
work, what else is going on personally, right? And what's unique into this industry is the work that we do. It's almost like, I mean, we compare ourselves, or we should be comparing ourselves, just like what doctors are doing, saving patients. We're saving companies or people from breaches, right? And
mhm,
a lot of
mhm,
people, the industry's gone through ups and downs of, who do you blame when there's a breach, right? And there's this fears that have been created within our own industry, right? But not
yeah.
only that, let's also talk about another really important area. Is there's a shortage in our industry, right?
Yes, so
And
true.
there's a big problem is, for a long time, IT had been siloed, and we didn't have enough people in this role. The importance wasn't as high up before. And if you see in a lot of IT teams, they're short staffed. And I hear this every single day is they're overworked, they're short staffed, there's not enough budget, especially in today's economy when there's lots of layoffs that are going on right now. People are doing 2 to 3 jobs a day,
Yeah.
right? And who's the first to go? Most people look at what are the areas we can cut, right? And IT, unfortunately, or security, unfortunately, people look at ways of an easy way to cut them out, right? But don't
Yeah.
realize the
Yeah.
importance of, hey, hang on, you can't get rid of, you know, a, individuals within this environment, I mean, within this team, within this department. So what I'm seeing is, when there are cuts, a lot of cybersecurity professionals have been impacted. As a
Yeah.
result,
Yeah.
more and more cybersecurity professionals are doing more, 2 to 3 times more of their work, right? And not to forget, we only have 8 hours a day, but they're spending more hours of their time working. And by the time you finish your day, you're exhausted, and you don't realize that you're exhausted, burnt out. And that's what I'm seeing in our industry with starting off with that shortage, but also starting going on, expanding into the layoffs of which departments get hit quickly.
Hey, Cybersec Migrant listeners. If you're enjoying the show, help us spread the word. Share the Cybersec Migrant podcast with your friends, your colleagues, and your network. It's the best way to help others discover our awesome content and to join the conversation. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and any other place where you get your podcast, so you never miss an episode. And do hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Your support helps us keep bringing you more valuable content, insights, and stories, and all these tips from the world of cybersecurity. And thank you for tuning in. And now, let's get back to today's episode. Yeah, and that's true. I think that burnout is one of the problems that we face. And that's because sometimes it's so, while the signs are there, it sometimes seems subtle because we're not looking for those signs. And that's why we don't notice it until suddenly, I've heard incidences of someone who was, the next thing you just hear, suddenly he had a stroke or he had a heart attack because he's been working so hard and no one really noticed the signs that he was being burnt out. So if we're going to start to normalize this conversation around mental health and stress in the workplace, what are some of those signs of burnout we can, start to look out for in ourselves, in our colleagues, to start to talk about these things so that we can catch them before they become a problem?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'll share even in my own journey, for example, which you don't realize, right? Many years ago, I actually was working, traveling into downtown, coming back. It's a long journey. So if I look at 8 hours of working hours, then I'm looking at additional time for travel back and forth, right? And then personally, what you're going through, right? So first, there's also work challenges. From a sales perspective, you need to meet your targets constantly because in the sales world here, you don't meet your targets in 3 months, you're out. Right?
True. Yeah.
So there's
It's a
always this
cultural
pressure.
world.
Yeah, that's a culture, and that's unfortunately the mentality here, right? All depends on department to department, right? But if I look at the first time, and I didn't realize I was expressing this stress, but years back when I actually was looking to start a family, right? And a lot of women are in the same situation. You don't want to tell your employer that you're looking to start a family. You're hush hush about it because you're
Yeah.
trying to um, not say this because you think it's going to affect the future of your promotions. It's going to affect so many different things. But a
Yeah.
lot of
True.
times you don't realize that is a stressful scenario you're going through when you're starting to try. It's just when you're starting to plan for a family that you can't even be open about it at work, for example. And then also not to forget, as you go through the processes around that, there's little pieces that stress you out, right? That you don't realize. And of course, a lot of people don't. And I'll take this on to another topic of how much stress has an impact on even just having a
Yeah.
family, right?
Yeah.
And this is what a lot of women go through, but we don't talk about it. And so I was very quiet about it. I was going through, personally back then, I was going through IVF cycles, and that can be stressful. I couldn't talk to anybody
Yeah.
about it, and I was working full time and trying to figure out this. I couldn't take time off, so I was working full time, trying to meet my targets, but at the same time going through medical procedures for an IVF cycle. And it's at some point you realize, actually, I need to take time off, right? I can't do this and work at the same time. And I remember I took 2 weeks because I asked the doctor for 2 weeks to take time off. But it was all hush hush because you don't have to, thankfully, you don't have to disclose what you're going through. And I did get that. But it was when, unfortunately, I realized that when it wasn't successful for me, it was when I realized I need to take time off. And those are the signs I started realizing for me personally is I was determined to figure out how to make it successful. And the only way was to reduce the stress. And it's to self-recognize what I needed to do so I'm not in a stressful situation. But again, a lot of people, and even in my own journey, it's hard for you to recognize because you get into this daily routine every day. You get into this routine, the pressures increase. You have a culture maybe from organizations where they're not supporting different
Yeah. Yeah.
situations. Like I wasn't really fully supported when I took that 2 weeks off. Because during those 2 weeks, any sales that closed during those 2 weeks, I wouldn't get paid, and that's hard, right? So
Yeah.
there is the
Yeah.
stress of first you're going through this, and then you take time off because you want to do it properly. But then you have a problem with the culture of organizations that they're not supporting it, and so you're stuck with how do
Yeah.
I, you know, how do I help myself? And of course, there's a time when it gets to, you feel confident enough about bringing this up and opening it up. Unfortunately, the problem is it all depends on company culture. If
Yeah.
you're
True.
open, I wasn't at that time when I was going through that. I didn't feel I could talk about this openly, and it was not normal to talk about this because it was all hush hush, and there was a fear if you do talk about it, it could impact your next role or promotion or something like that.
Yeah. And that's so true. You feel that there's certain expectations from you in the workplace, and if you don't meet those expectations, you don't grow in your career. I know it's particularly harder, and we're talking about this earlier, you and I. For people who are not traditionally in those roles, so women in cybersecurity, for example, because typically, I was one of my previous episodes. I interviewed a couple of brilliant ladies who I do some work with, and one of them said she goes into a meeting room and they ask who's the representative from this person, and you're like, she's the one, and you're like, it's a woman, and they would actually not even look her in the eye or ask her a question. So there's already a very high bar for women or minorities, and then that becomes challenging where you feel you can't say anything because if you did say that, you're already disadvantaged. You're only making your situation worse. So, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, I think that company culture. It's important for companies to realize that it's this is something that we need to do. My personal thinking is I say if you begin to find that you're overexerting yourself, you're doing too much already. Because
Yes.
no job should have you overexert yourself just to get the job to work. Maybe you should find
Yeah,
another job if that's happening. So if you're overexerting yourself, I think it's too much. But
I
no,
agree.
so now that thank you for sharing your story, that was important and it was good to connect with that. I can connect with some of those things as well, personally as well. So as you work through all of that, to realize that okay, I need to do better, I need to get things in the right place. Are there any practices or routines that you did that you found helpful, or what you can recommend to people to say, hey, if you find that you're going through this, try doing this or try doing that, and to help you be better, get some more balance and less stressful.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest things was I know when I was going through this, and that time when I was stressing out about it, I joined the gym. There was this competition we had internally within the organization as the biggest loser, right? And I joined it. And I was like, I've got to sit and join this. And it became fun, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I felt like it helped me switch off. So for those who, find that one activity that's going to help you switch off that you look forward to. So today I actually do, I've stopped for a bit, but I'm going to get back into it, is oxygen yoga. So the minute it's, 4:45 is my class. So it's 4:45. I switch off from work and then I go for my class. So it's important to put that. And I chose something where because I know I'm not disciplined, that I could get carried away. So I need something that's going to help me discipline myself. And I know with this class is if I don't cancel within 4 hour window, I get charged $20, right?
Okay,
So
good.
it's pushed me. It's because I'm like, I don't want to pay $20 every time I miss a class. And that's what I chose for me in order for me to get disciplined, right? And I needed that fast, I needed something that's going to push me. Like in that case, years back, it was the biggest loser. I had that, what's going to motivate me and find out what's going to motivate you is the first step. And I knew that what's going to motivate me is winning that challenge. So
Yeah,
that's why I did it, and that's why I committed my time. And it was all of us that we committed our times because then we were competing against each other. And being in sales, you're always competing. So you've got that in you. You're so
yeah,
competitive.
yeah, yeah,
And so finding things that's based on what your personality is, whatever it is, it could be a book club, arrange with a few people, and it's something you're looking forward to in order to actually switch off. And that was the first step that helped me realize, like, wow, I'm not as that one thing, switching off and pushing myself out to do something else. I wouldn't come back and start working again. It really helped me start creating those boundaries between work and making sure, okay, this is time to stop, because I was working ridiculous hours in the
Yeah.
beginning.
Yeah.
And to your point, I was trying to prove myself, I was trying to prove my worth, I was severely underpaid, I wanted to show the org again, I was the one creating a little bit of my own stresses, as I wanted to
Stress.
show the company that I'm worth it here, and you've hired me and you're going to get a lot more out of me, right? But
Yeah.
again, that
Yeah.
was, I should have changed my mindset versus waiting
That's
for
the
it
word.
too late, right? Right. So it's changing that mindset was important for me.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's so right. It's that mindset, because that mindset of you have to work so hard to get things done. And then if you don't do that, you're probably going to get kicked out. Yes, there's the fear of that, but I think things are a lot better these days. Companies are doing a lot better, but they can still do so much more, so much more than what they've done already.
Yes.
I can also relate to that thing you said about finding something to occupy your time. One of the things I look forward to at work is there's a couple of things that happen. So every fall we have a scavenger hunt, which is always absolutely fun. So, and we're competing against each other to get the most points. And there's a team out in Quebec, out in the east of in the east of the country, who every year for the last 3 years they've been awesome. They like blow every other team out of the water. One person on that team is retired, so I'm hoping that we can beat them this year. So hopefully, and then we've got a well-being challenge as well, that every twice a year in the fall and in the spring we do a well-being challenge where you're doing steps, you're trying to record how many times you're taking a walk, record how many times you're doing all of that. And I remember one of the teams, one of them we did last year, just because it was competitive. One of the teams was named Better Beat Kyle, because Kyle was known as the fitness person and the fitness guru. So we have to beat Kyle to make sure that. So they were working so hard, and all of that. And it's like I said, it helps you take your mind off of work. It helps you sort of relieve that stress in a way, because you can focus your attention on other things, working out, fitness, eating healthy, all of that. I think it's all of that just together makes it a much better holistic, person for you as a whole.
Yes.
But then I want
I
to
mean,
change tack and talk about something else.
yeah.
These days, especially when you're looking at, I look at people talking about, hiring and jobs and all that, and they say that one of the most popular terms today is work-life balance. You know, what exactly does that mean for those of us who are in cybersecurity? Because our role is so demanding. There's some roles. Take somebody who's working in a SOC, for example, or somebody who's doing sales, for example, where you've got to meet with clients, or you've got to work odd hours just to get things to work. It's very demanding to work in cybersecurity. How do we get that work-life balance, and how realistic is it really for us to actually achieve that as a cybersecurity professional?
you know, and that's what the biggest challenge is in this industry is a lot of people talk about work-life balance. I mean, I literally try and ask, what is the definition of work-life balance? And you'll hear lots
Nobody
of different
knows.
nobody knows. There is no definition, right? For some, it's like, hey, I like to work 9 to 5. And for some, it's like, I like to work other hours of the day. But is that okay by companies? And that's where the
Yeah.
problem is, right? Is that okay, right? So, what is work life balance, right? And I think each one of us needs to define what that is. We need to be very clear ourselves versus what the industry tries to define it as. I mean, I'll tell you one thing is, companies in the past I've worked at, and they've had unlimited time off. And they show, look,
Whoa,
this is how we're supporting it. Yeah, unlimited time off.
that's so good.
So you
Companies,
think
are you
that's,
listening?
but do you think that's really good? Because how many, and I can tell you for sure, when I had that, how many of us did unlimited time off? Like, I came back with less time than, those companies where you had 20 days, and if you don't use them, you're going to lose them, right?
No.
How often did I, and, there's also that perception. There's, again, fear of, if I take more time off, my boss is not going to appreciate it, or the
Yeah.
company's going to appreciate it, or somebody's going to question or comment about it. So again, this is a lot in the US. There is a lot of US companies who have this new thing. New startups have come with unlimited time off. Realistically, how many people take that?
Mm.
Like, do you think someone can say, okay, you know what, I'm going to take this whole month off, but for the rest of the 11 months, I'm going to work amazingly because I'm going to feel refreshed? I don't
It
know.
doesn't work that way most
It
times.
doesn't work that way. So it sounds good, but is it really implemented as a best practice? And can people really use and leverage that, saying, you know what, this 1 month, I just want to switch off and turn everything off, and I'll feel better the next 11 months while I'm working. And,
Mm.
there's actually an interesting one. There's this individual I know in Calgary. He's amazing. He's cybersecurity professional, one of the CISOs that I've known for a very long time. What he used to do is after every 7 years, he takes a year off. And
Oh,
for him, luckily, his company allows him to do that. They hold his position and he takes a year off. He feels refreshed, rejuvenated, and he comes back and he continues on for the next 7 years. And that works for him,
yeah.
right? And
Okay.
for each one of us, we have to find what really works for us. Unfortunately, there's also the pressures at work, right? If you do
Mm.
something like that, is there that support system today to actually help you? And if maybe they might be, but there's fear of even asking about, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to work for 3 years and take a year out and then come back and continue. It's questionable for each one for what they want to achieve and whether there's support out there to be able to support that.
Yeah. That's so true. I think from what you're saying, what I'm hearing is find what works best for you. Because
Yeah.
what works for Tom isn't necessarily going to work for Harry. So it's that.
No.
That leads
Yeah.
me to another similar thing. We've also heard the term mindfulness. And I I think I understand what that is, but as someone who's had this journey, who's doing a lot of work in that space, can you share some simple, mindfulness techniques, the benefits of mindfulness, and how that can help us with our really hectic schedules to do better, be less stressed?
Yes. There's actually a course that I took on that. And again, let me pause, and I'd love to hear what your definition is of mindfulness. Since you
Well,
mentioned that, I'd love to hear that, and then I'll share a little bit about the course.
for me, mindfulness is about being intentional about what you're doing.
Yeah.
So being in the present. So don't don't allow external stress or extraneous factors to determine what's going to work best. If you say, for example, one of the things I do is at the start of every week, I say to myself, what do I have to accomplish this week? I have them listed out. Okay. And I actively go on my calendar and I'm blocking off white space here and say, okay, at this time I'm doing this. At that time I'm doing that. I am not going to look at my phone and doom scroll for this time because I need to get these things done. So I'm mindfully making out the time, like you said, and then do that. And then at the end of the week, I'm looking back and saying, okay, of the things I listed on Monday to achieve, have I achieved them all? Where did I come
Hmm.
short? Because sometimes there's an emergency, something comes up and you have to change your plans. Yes. But you have to actively tell yourself, okay, I want to achieve this. I'm going to actively take out 1 hour to go walk around the park just because I need to do that. There might
Hmm.
be work waiting, there might be a deadline you have to meet. If you need to leave that work and walk away, do that at that time. So that's how I approach it, and it's helped me a lot, um, for me
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah. I mean, you're right, spot on over there with being the mindfulness. The key to that is creating a habit out of it, right? To your point, is making sure that, and it doesn't have to be that only after I finish work, right? Like the example I
Yeah.
gave about I finish work and then I go for my walks or I go do my yoga, otherwise I'm going to get charged. We have to throughout the day, because our energies work up and down, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have to actually. In this course, it gave a really good tip, and it talked about simple things, right? So it's not insane. It's very simple things like 20 minutes um, every day, I think is what it said. Go do a walk. Go
Mm.
for a walk. Do low activity, for example.
Close your rings for those of us who have Apple Watches.
Yeah, yeah. You have to be mindful of it though,
Yeah.
right? Because I did it, and I'll be the first one to put my hand up, and I did it for the first week. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. But this course pushed us because this course was done over 6 weeks.
Okay.
So I now was forced to put it into my calendar because I can't go to the next course in next week if I haven't completed
The first
this.
week.
But to be mindful of this, right, is it just made me realize like how much more energy I was getting by breaking my day and not waiting until the end of the day. So you have to be mindful of
Mm.
which times in the day are you most at peak and which times do you start getting down and what's causing that, and if that energy goes down, bring something, whatever you've thought about, bring something that's going to help you break out of that, right? Because you can't always operate in that high energy space. Nobody
It's not
can,
possible.
right?
No.
It's not possible. So making sure that you're doing that, and this forced me over 6 weeks. So I had to do it over 6 weeks to the extent that it became a habit. The challenge is, of course, then you go back into your old habits after some
Yeah.
time.
That
So
happens
that's
to the best of us.
it does, right? So I agree with you on that. Being mindful of it is, a lot of people. So for other people, it's journaling. Write it down,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And when you write it down, it just gets you to reflect. It goes back again. What did I accomplish this week? And then you prioritize. How important was it to accomplish this? And how important was it to accomplish some of the other things? And
Yeah.
just putting it into that, when people talk about time management, about the big stones and the small stones, like how you can maximize that, that example that they
Mm-hmm.
give,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the same concept of doing this and being mindful, is creating that graph of what is important, what is not as important, what did you get done that shouldn't have, but it created more stress. You could have put it later on, right? And managing that. And then, of course, the big thing, which is aligning it to your values, right? A lot of people forget about that, right? How does this one particular piece, like I did the sunrise challenge,
Yeah.
it aligns to my
That was good.
values. And if, to your point, even though, like for me, I have lost family members, unfortunately, I've lost my family members due to mental health. And what's hard is that, you know, what they struggled and they suffered alone, right? And
Yeah.
nobody should be going through this alone. And that's the biggest problem today is people who are going through mental health, they're suffering in silence and they're going through this alone. And having been gone through that myself, I know how important it is when I've seen family members who've suffered in silence. And I had no idea. Many of us come back saying, we had no idea that they made a decision. And so that's why I am very mindful of participating every year in the Sunrise Challenge, really actually bringing more awareness of people about mental health. And even when I'm on vacation, I will wake up to see the beautiful sunrise. And what it is that first day, it's hard waking up at 5 a.m. or 5:30 a.m., depending on where you are.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
imagine me going through that. Imagine those who are suffering through mental
Yeah.
health silently. They can't even do that, and
Yeah.
it's hard,
Yeah.
and it's so hard. And so bringing that's a big thing for me, is what my personal value is, and therefore I commit, and I'm mindful of committing to something like that to bring awareness, just because I don't want to see people go through this in silence.
Yeah. My condolences on the family member you lost. I know how hard
Thank
that can
you.
be.
Yes.
I've not lost anyone directly, but I've known third party people who have been in the same situation, and that brings a very interesting conversation. Like when you said you wake up in the morning. I know. So I live quite a ways, but I remember in the summer one of the things I loved to do, and I did that maybe every other week. I would drive away from where I was. I'll drive all the way to the White Rock Pier just to catch the sunrise from there. So, and it's about a 50-minute drive for me. So I would leave home before the sun because I have to leave home before the sunrise so that I can catch the sunrise. And I would take a time lapse. And it is so refreshing. It is so it's so soothing to actually do that. But you raised a good point there. That it's important to have that support system because no man is an island. No person should have to go through stress or suffer that alone. So we know it's important to actually have that support system in place. But in this industry, what should that support system look like? What do we need to if we say support systems for those having mental health challenges, what should that look like? Because there's a stigma around talking about mental health or saying, oh, I need help. So what does that support system look like? How would you talk to people who might be hesitant to actually trying to find a support system? All of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the word stigma is a big one to talk about, actually, because there is a big stigma in many communities, including in our cybersecurity industry, right? And that's what the problem is. Like, I will tell you, growing up, and this is me in my community, growing up, if you say, hey, I'm going to be talking to somebody because I'm struggling mentally, the word mental means something completely different.
Different. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you think the person's mental, so they should be in hospital. And that's the old school way of how people in
Thought
some
about it.
cultures
Yeah.
look at it. If you're
Mine
talking
too.
to somebody, it's yeah, it's like really it's you're then not you're not part of that community.
Yes,
So
you're
for some
excluded.
excluded, thank you. Yeah, that's the word, right? That's person's mental, right? Or something like
Yeah.
that. You're not,
Yeah.
you really get excluded, which is again a big problem.
Yeah.
Culture
Makes it worse, I think.
totally gets worse. So what happens as a result is people are suffering in silence because they don't want to be excluded. For those who've not been included, it's hard to try and constantly try and find ways of how you can fit in and to make sure you belong. And what you end up doing is you struggle in silence. And I will tell you, like, um, back to this whole scenario is when you start, like, I didn't even know, number one, I didn't even know that I could talk to people, right? Until, like, when someone passes away, I didn't know that there was individuals you can go and talk about. uh if someone's passed away, you can talk to somebody about that, right? You can
Yeah.
go and ask for help because you're emotionally going through a lot. I didn't know about that, and a lot of it is you don't know what you don't know, and you kind of are grieving in silence but not realizing how much it's affecting you, right? So
Yeah.
having that, step one is that stigma is, how do we get rid of that stigma in communities, is actually talking more about it, and openly
Yeah.
saying, hey, yeah, you know what, I have someone that I speak to frequently. When I was going through another scenario when my husband was in a car accident, and he couldn't walk, and so I was working full time. And at the same time, I had to make sure, because he couldn't get out of bed. It was during COVID as well. And I was
Oh,
struggling because this is where we talk about third degree stress,
stress.
because you're supporting somebody else, right? So my focus was supporting my husband because he could not walk and he was in bed for 3 months, right? So you're there as a support person helping somebody, and it was not easy for somebody who's gone through a major accident. It's not easy of what they're going through, but you're going to be that support person. But you don't realize how it's affecting you. That's when I realized I need to create that circle of people that I can talk to. So I had about 3 or 4 women in my network where I was talking to them, because I couldn't go to my husband and say, hey, look, I'm really stressed because of work and all this other
Yeah.
stuff. I needed to find, a close group of individuals. And there was one or two individuals, particularly, where I know I could just sit and I could talk to them openly, because by talking it out, that in itself just removes stress,
Yeah.
right? And people don't realize that third degree stress of how it affects you, because you're focused on, I need to help this person, but you don't realize how you're getting affected, that you need that help too. And having that cycle of creating that circle of you're supporting somebody, so make sure you have your support circle, make sure they have their support circle too while they're helping you.
Yeah, that is so true. I think talking about it is one of the biggest things you can do. Um, I think it is definitely better than it was 20 years ago. That much we know, but it can be so much better. And that's why I know one of the things I have access to. I have a platform that allows me to talk to someone. If you think you're having and just talking to people that can help, because I know. So earlier this year at work, they had a few issues where I had to actually talk to somebody, help someone to work through a bit of a challenge. And I think that's where it's important to realize you don't have to walk alone. Like the famous Liverpool slang, you don't walk alone. You never walk alone. You have to, find who can support you along that journey. Because I think the saying is, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together, right? So that's the one. So if we really want to actually make a big impact, I think it's important for us to actually find, those people. Who are those people that I can talk to? Who I can be my complete vulnerable self with, and I can tell them,
Hmm.
okay, this is exactly how I'm feeling, you know, and who are okay. They're not going to be judgmental or say, well, you could have done this differently. It's not. That's not their role. Their role is to just allow you to just be yourself. Let all that stress out. I think that really, really does help. So
And also,
companies where they can help, let them provide those resources. I know some companies provide those resources, which is good. Some
mhm,
companies do not yet. If you can, I think companies, if you're listening to this, I think it's important for your team to help them
agreed.
feel that they're being appreciated. What they're doing is good. It's important. I think that's also
Yes.
very important. Um,
Yes. I
can you
agree.
recommend any resources? Do you, off the top of your head, or anything you found actually pretty useful that can help us in this industry to just better um, manage our mental health, better, maintain it at a level that's healthy, because that
Hmm.
is so important.
Yes. I mean, there's so many books. There's so many podcasts. It's so easy to get information where you can read. But I think the biggest thing when I talk about resources is that self reflection, right?
Yeah,
Really looking back and self reflecting on seeing your own early signs, because that's the first piece that you need to look into, right? Before it gets, as I said earlier on, before it gets too late. So the resource I would say is usually don't start looking for resources when it's too late, like when you're so deep into it, because I can tell you, being there myself, it will be hard to pick that book, right? It would be really hard to do that. And doing this from a much earlier stage of whatever you're going through is a big thing, right? The other resource, I mean, there's all these different apps today. Technology has made it easy for us now. We've
yeah,
got all these
yeah,
different apps. There's the Calm app, many things that you can
yeah,
use today. The first thing is, again, self reflecting and agreeing that
yeah,
this is the first
yeah,
step you need to do. And doing it is that next step, right? Otherwise, all these resources are of no use, right?
yeah,
So that's what I would say is that going back, what has helped for individuals I've talked to, and what I encourage is just keep doing this as a habit. Create this as a habit. Just be
yeah.
mindful of it, and make this
Mindfulness.
into your daily routine, right?
Yeah,
Because if you don't make this into a daily routine, we've all been there,
yeah,
right? I
yeah,
can, you and I can put our hands up. We've all been there. We've been so stressed. We've been so deep into it, and it's hard to get out of it.
yeah,
And either you then, if you've got a good organization, you can take some time off. But if you don't, then you're stuck, and you're suffering
yeah,
alone. And to your point, get that, to what we talked about earlier on. A great resource is find that one person or two individuals that you can go and speak to and chat, and just tell them how you're feeling. Don't wait until it's too late to tell them how you're feeling, because then it's harder to fix.
yeah,
And then, of course, professional help. I'm a big fan, big advocate of getting professional help. There's nothing wrong in going and seeking professional help, because a lot of times it's not easy to try and sort it out yourself. having that when I
Yeah.
was going through that. I actually was going through counseling, and it helped me. The company had 3 sessions I could get for free, and I didn't know about it. And I said, you know what? I'll try it. What the hell? What am I
Exactly.
going to lose?
What are you going to lose? Exactly.
Yeah, I have nothing to lose. And I got professional help. I had 3 sessions with that individual. It just helped. It really helped having, while with professional help, there's a framework that they follow through. It really helped me. For me, it was helped me self reflect where I was in my mental state and what I needed to do to get out of this state.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so true. And like you said, I think everybody's journey is different, you know. So that self-reflective, that self-reflection piece is so important because that's what's going to let you know what is my journey going to look like. Because if you don't do that, you can't even begin to start your journey. And if you don't start your journey, you then don't get out of that rut, and it becomes a cycle that just keeps drawing you in, and you sink, and it gets bad. And we don't want to get into that place. So, absolutely important. Self-reflect. It's so important. So we've had a very interesting conversation today. It's been going on so long, and we can keep going on already. But let's just let's boil it down. If you had to boil it down and say 3 things you want people to remember from our conversation today, 3 takeaways, what would those be?
Yes. As we talked about this mental health is like a disease and people don't realize it, right? And this is something that can or cannot be cured. It's still there, right? It's still there's lots of research out there. But the first thing is don't go through it alone. Don't suffer in silence. Find a path or an avenue or a person, whether it's a tool, whether it's talking to somebody, or whether it's seeking professional help, or it's going to the gym. Find that path for you, right?
Yeah,
This second thing I would say is don't wait until it's too late. Just make sure that you are working on your mental health every single day. And I can tell you, all of us, there's been ups and downs. Life is like a
yeah,
bumpy
yeah,
road. So it's a safari, right? You're going up and down, up and down, up and
yeah,
down, right?
yeah,
And don't wait until you go to your down for you to do something, right? And that's what I would say is just keep being mindful of it, right? Mental health is something that it's not like, hey, I wouldn't get it because I'm in a good spot today. Um,
yeah,
it will happen to everybody at some form or the other.
yeah. True,
So
true.
being mindful of it and instill some habits that will help reduce the state, the mental health state. So, like we talked about, some different things you can do. Like it could be. I know we did a great job during COVID when people were doing this and going for walks and doing meetings for walks, and then we've come back out of COVID and it's all out the window.
Yeah,
So
unfortunately.
habits, yeah, unfortunately, create that habit of whatever it is you're doing and continue that. The third thing is around removing that fear. We brought a little bit of the topic on the
Yeah,
stigma, right?
yeah, yeah,
Is and bringing this into normalizing this conversation and to all the leaders, to organizations, and things like that. If you don't talk about it, your team's not going to talk about it. So that's the biggest thing is in order to change this culture within a company, in order to change this within your own teams, talk about it. And I can tell you one thing is if one person talks about it, that fear in that person who is also being faced with the same or a similar issue, for example, that just goes away. Like, for example, when I talked about me going through IVF, if I had just said, hey, I'm going through IVF, I'm very, very stressed, I can tell you if I was open about it, or not if I was open, if there was one leader who had talked about that, for
yeah,
example, family planning, I would have felt so much at ease because I would have felt like I
yeah,
can talk about it.
yeah. True, true.
So I would encourage leaders out there, is talk about your mental health state. When you're having bad days, you don't always have to be the strong person in the room all the time just because you've got the leadership title.
Yeah.
Remember, you're inspiring others. So you've got to be realistic and talk about things like this. And when you honestly, if I just needed one person to talk about it and I would have felt at ease. Right. But if you don't, then we're going to continue suffering in silence. So we
So we
need to
don't want that.
normalize these conversations. That's the only way we can change. And each one of us, each one of you viewers who are listening, open up, talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are
I
other
just
people while talking about it, you are also helping other people. So you're having a
yeah.
big, greater good towards the society to improve the society. Because while you're trying to solve your problem, guess what? You're helping somebody else
Solve theirs.
without knowing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of something one of my mentors, he's late now, used to say. He used to say, if everyone could reach one, then everyone can teach one, and the world would be a better place. That
Well
was
said.
that was his word, and I
Well
think that just captures the essence of it. Even if it's just touching one person and that makes an impact, it's
said.
it's something to be happy about. Let the dopamine hit. That's what we want. So um it's been so great talking to you today, Arde. I've enjoyed every minute of it. It's gone on. I didn't even know the time just went by so quickly, but it's been so good. Thank you for coming to talk about this, because I think it's very important for us, and particularly this Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so that we know that we don't always have to be the strong people who are safeguarding the industries. We also are okay for us to be able to say, hey, I need some rest. I need some downtime. I need to take time off, and to talk about it. And like you rightly said, let's get the leadership of companies to talk about this, because that's one way that we all, can make this better for us all. So thank you so much. And thank you to the audience for tuning in. It's been good having Artie here. So if you have any, thoughts, opinions, please put them down in the comments below. In the notes below, I'm also going to put a link to Artie's LinkedIn profile, so you can see all the good things she does on LinkedIn. You can follow her when she does the Sunrise Challenge. You can take part in the challenge as well. That would be
Join
great.
us.
I'm sure she's always open to connection. Leave your reviews. And also, like I said, this is part of the our special episodes that we're doing for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So stay tuned. Keep on listening to our podcast. We'd love that. If you're not following our podcast, please, you can do that. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't take anything away from you. It's going to make you feel good as well. We're available on all podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Castbox, iHeartRadio, everywhere. We're also on YouTube. So subscribe, share. And if you think you've got value out of this episode, and you think someone else can learn from this, please share that with them. Let's also help someone. Let's reach someone so we can help them be better. And until next time, any parting words, Adi?
Thank you. I mean, I love your vision and what your mission for this podcast. So, to all the viewers, definitely listen to all the other ones. Thank you for the work that you're doing in this community. We really appreciate you. And to all the viewers, asante sana, shukriya, arigato gozaimasu. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Namaste. And until next time, this is Femi signing out from the Cybersec Migrant podcast.